So, good afternoon. Again, my name is Holly Mitchell, and I have the privilege of being chairwoman of the LA County Board of Supervisors. You know, LA County is the largest municipal government in the country with 10 million residents, a $40 billion budget, and just 5 women who have the privilege of serving on the Board of Supervisors. So thank you, Laurel, for the introduction and for inviting me here today. It's great to be here as a part of the 2022 Equity Crowdfunding Week. And congratulations to Laurel and Jose from Startup Starter and their entire team for really creating this opportunity for us all to share some time and space together. I literally just left from the reopening celebration of some small businesses in my district in the unincorporated community of West Athens along the Western corridor in South Los Angeles. And these are small businesses that truly suffered at a disproportionate rate as a result of COVID. And they're benefiting from a program we sponsored at LA County called Renovate, where they received grants, not loans, but grants for improvements, tenant improvements, facade improvements. And the capital that was invested in their small businesses provided them with a renewed opportunity for their businesses and for their families. And as a third-generation Native Angelino, that really makes me very proud. For small businesses and for startups like those that many of you have, capital clearly is the missing link to success. And I appreciate Startup Starter's focus on supporting Black, Indigenous, people of color businesses, because those, from my perspective, are the entrepreneurs that are often overlooked and not invested in. So I appreciate your focus. The intention of equity and racial equity in every issue area is very important to create an environment in a society where everyone truly has an opportunity to thrive. Thrive is a very important word to me. If you are ever in my office or hear me speak places, you'll hear me use that term very strategically and intentionally. As I mentioned, I'm a third-generation Native Angelino, and my parents worked, quite frankly, for LA County. And it was seeing their passion for community that really inspired my own life choices to be of service and in service to what I call my family, friends, and neighbors, my fellow Angelinos. I was the president of one of the largest child development nonprofit organizations in the country, Crystal Stairs. And it was through my work primarily there at Crystal Stairs where I learned on a frankly more deeply level the impact housing on the stability of housing can really have on a family and their children. I led that organization and we advocated for resources for families to live in the communities that were intentionally, unfortunately, not invested in. Those families that had the stability of home were the ones with greater opportunity to move from surviving to thriving. Those that didn't suffered, and so do their children. So again, let me pause here for a moment. I want to allow this term to sink in with everybody, to thrive. Imagine that world where everyone has the opportunity to actually thrive. So I challenge you all to look around you, see the people around you. Imagine the world where someone who looks like me, Black woman, middle-aged, dreadlocks, can walk into any business, walk into any financial institution, and feel welcome, to feel seen and respected. And that the person who is providing the service or deciding on the housing application or the loan application, whatever it is, does so fairly, without bias. My North Star is about getting to that vision where everyone thrives. I believe that a focus on equity, racial equity, and eliminating what I call the disease of racism in our society is how we'll achieve this world where everyone has a true opportunity to thrive. And so I appreciate that the leaders of Startup Starter have built their company with equity at its core. and the future of housing needs that as well. A focus on equity. Housing and homelessness is the #1 issue the 2 million people I represent in LA County encounter and communicate with me about on a daily basis. I get asked regularly, what can we do to solve our homelessness and our housing crisis? And if we can solve it, particularly through this election season. And the short answer for me is yes, we absolutely can, and quite frankly, have a moral obligation to focus on and solve for that problem. The question is how? And that too has a short, easy answer. How do we solve it? We solve it with housing. Housing ends homelessness. I really want to make sure, if you remember nothing else I said today, that you are clear. Housing ends homelessness. And supportive services, which is what government does, is what allows people to maintain their housing. I'm a firm believer in the concept of housing first. I spent 10 years serving in the California legislature, proudly carried the bill that made California a housing first state. And I authored a motion when I got here to the LA County Board of Supervisors, affirming the county's commitment to housing first as an approach. Housing first is about removing the barriers for people who are experiencing homelessness to say yes to housing and yes to supportive services. I don't have to pick. You're not forced to prove your sobriety or prove your worthiness to be awarded, air quotes, housing. Housing must come first to enable you the safe environment in which you can then begin to address those other issues. The true challenge that we have in housing is not the solutions, it's that we're decades behind. We're behind because there was intentional disinvestment in housing by government and by private capital in certain communities. And if I can frankly be real with you, it was specifically in communities where Black, brown, and poor people of color lived and continue to live. The county's housing authority used to receive a little more than 90% of its budget from the federal government. But in the mid-90s, the federal government started their aggressive defunding of housing. They, in effect, got out of the housing business. Where did that leave us as states and local government? We now receive just a little over 60% of our budget from the federal government at a time when we have the greatest need, at a time where LA County is 500,000 housing units short of what her residents need. As government and as citizens, we need to double down on investing into housing and those supportive services. It's only been in the past 5 years that we've had an unprecedented amount of local funding through voter initiatives, Measure H at the county level, Measure HHH at the city of LA, the American Rescue Plan dollars just recently, and as well as funding from the state of California. I know I said earlier there was one thing I wanted you to take away from today, which is housing ends homelessness. I'm going to add one more thing to that. Housing ends homelessness, and funding gets us housing. My role as a policymaker is to create the strategic and intentional policy environment in order to build the housing. To make the vision of a world where everyone has a true opportunity to thrive, I frankly need you as my partner. Every single one of you, your friends, your families, and neighbors, I need you as a partner in racial equity. I need you to continue to innovate on materials, building on platforms to increase access to services. I need you to partner with each other and guide the private capital in a responsible and equitable way. I know that for startups, particularly in technology, it's about the new and innovative, the latest and the greatest. I get that. But let me add, if I may be so forward, to your imagination for a bit by drawing from a movie that spoke volumes to me. And the movie is Hidden Figures. For those of you who didn't see it, The movie is about 3 brilliant black women scientists at NASA and how the work of Katherine Johnson literally got us to the moon. There's a scene in the movie with ceiling to floor chalkboards and all this math on it, and she's literally on a ladder engaged in equations. And her boss is pushing her and all the scientists for the new math that will get us to the moon. And as Catherine is sitting there contemplating, she has an aha moment, and she runs over to her old office, quite frankly, in the colored people section of NASA where she had been housed. And she pulls out this old dusty book, and she rushes back to the huge chalkboard. And her boss is perplexed, asking her, what are you doing? She says, what if it's not about new math, but what if it's actually about old math? And in that old math, she figured it out and got us to the moon. So as you work on innovation in your field, think about the innovation in communities that have been long ignored, the old math per se, that could work now in this current emerging environment. Partner with people that have been doing the work to create and sustain housing for decades. They might benefit from your new vision of a new world. The crisis is getting more attention now than ever, which is a good thing, but this crisis has been felt by black and brown and poor people for multiple generations. The fight for the resources to stem the housing crisis has really been going on for quite some time. So I want to encourage you to partner with intentionality with those that have been fighting for this change. As I wrap up, please remember 2 things. Housing ends homelessness, and funding gets us housing. Thank you very much. I've appreciated sharing time and space with you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Startup Starters 2022 Equity Crowdfunding Week. Thank you for the opportunity.